of all the times we could have picked to record the East Final, and we will get to that, plus other stuff, we had just a major bombshell drop as Toronto Argonauts now need a brand new head coach, as Ryan Dinwiddie has taken his talents from Ontario's capital to Canada's capital, as he is the newest head coach of the Ottawa Redblacks while assuming general manager role. And also, Sean Burke is going from general manager to VP of football ops. And who better than my press box cohort, Frank Stanishi, to talk about this all through? Frank, initial thoughts, reactions, and more importantly, where does this leave the Toronto Argonauts?
On the hunt. Well, we planned on doing this. Griff said, "Hey, Frank, you want to do something in a couple of days?" I said, "Sure, there's nothing going on, but if you still want to do something, we can do something."
Yeah.
And Griff says to me, he says, "So, Frank, it looks like I'm going to be home a little earlier. Can I if you want to start earlier because you got that other show, we can start earlier." And I said, "It doesn't matter. My next show, Aaron William Freeland does a show with me. Said he had something that came up, so he couldn't do the show. So I said, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that." I hung up on him, and within a couple of minutes, I'm getting phone calls, and I got a phone call from our mutual friend David Morisuti. He says to me, "I got to go jump in the shower right now, but did you hear?" And I said, "You mean Dinwiddie, new general manager and head coach of the Ottawa Redblacks?" He goes, "Yeah." Well, can I say I saw this coming and you not laugh out loud?
No, I won't laugh because I had heard just through Twitter that Ottawa radio was speculating on, hey, what if this were to happen? And I also heard on just through my cohorts at Three Down Nation that, hey, if Ottawa wants to make a big time swing for the fences kind of move, this would be the move to do. I just want to know, what did OSEG, Ottawa Sports Entertainment Group, pay MLSC to get Dinwiddie out of his contract? Because it's not like he was on an expiring deal.
I don't think they had to give him a cent. The loophole everywhere in the Canadian Football League has been from day one. And this is something you're going to go, "Oh, yeah, right," because I know you already know it, but I'm going to remind you. Any improvement in position doesn't require permission of the previous administration to leave, right? He signed as a GM and coach. In the CFL, nobody stands in the way of somebody getting a better job.
Okay, yes. Now it's coming back to me where it's, hey, if it was head coach to head coach, they would have had to buy him out of his current contract. But because they gave him the promotion, it's not, hey, we need to go seek permission. Instead, it was, hey, you're the new head coach, you're the new GM. Sean Burke's also getting promoted upstairs. My big question, though, with all this, though, like I said, I respect the hell out of Ottawa for going for a move like this. They were a 4-14 football club last year, dysfunction all around. Also surprised that he's only the fourth head coach in franchise history, just considering how bad Ottawa has been over the last 6-7 years. But from a standpoint of Toronto, there's one name that sniffed to my mind immediately because there's a man in Winnipeg who's on an expiring contract whose season just came to an end. Do the Argonauts entice Mike O'Shea to join? Maybe have a Mike and Mike connection where you have O'Shea as head coach and Mike Miller as offensive coordinator? Or do you go down that younger rabbit hole and try to get like a Mark Mueller from Saskatchewan or another reclamation project head coach? Like what's the course of action? Just because with everything Toronto's got to face going into this offseason, this is just another fork in the road for them.
If history is prologue, I'd suggest they go down that first road you talked about. Take somebody who's an up and comer. New and fresh ideas are big in the Canadian Football League right now. And the judgment of whoever makes the decision, we assume it's pinball, right, in the center of the decision-making process. And he's well liked and he knows everybody and he'll have an opinion on something. Now, the question is, the decision that they made on Ryan Dinwiddie turned out to be a really good one, right? But there's no guarantee. Taking the next step isn't always a guarantee.
Yep.
There's an old book called The Peter Principle where a lot of people get promoted until they fail.
Yes.
So there's that concern too. But I think there are plenty of really good football minds out there, and there are a lot of people who because of the way the cap for management works, it becomes even more enticing if you could be a head coach on a team, because then you get into some real money. Because you and I both know the assistant coaches, whatever, the specialty coaches, the money starts to really shrink by the time you get down there.
Yeah, that's just the thing too. Like we all know this, the flack MLSC has taken recently for like how the Argonauts are treated, and like everything going on next year with losing the 3 home games. The big way to look at this for Toronto is just how do you salvage yourself from becoming that next Ottawa Redblack? Like how, and then no offense to Ottawa, but like how it's, you had your moments. Dinwiddie was here for, or I even want to take another path with this. Does it potentially signify that he kind of saw stuff going in a direction he wasn't a fan of and said, "Hey, I want to get out of here before this ship sinks"? Or is it, "Hey, this is a chance for me to make more money to really have my keep"? Because we all know at the end of the day, he was a player personnel decisions. And for as much as we thought, guys with the mass exodus last year, I think there's a potential for mass exodus for certain Dinwiddie guys to go to Ottawa this coming season too.
I think I'll agree with you and put it differently.
Yeah.
Okay. We want you to come and be our head coach, our GM. We want you to play for the Argos. Now, by the way, we're going to have 6 less home games than we're usually going to have. So we want you to come to be our head coach, our players, and we're going to have a tough schedule next year. Would you like to come? I'm going the other way. But it's the same story. They're going to have a tougher sale. Now, how tough is that sale? I might be overstating it, or I may sound like I'm overstating it, but still, there's no argument stating it as a reality. It's harder to sell your program if your program is literally handicapped, and less home games is a handicap. Let's not mince words here.
They basically said, okay, we're going to kick you in the balls once, we're going to kick you in the balls twice, and we're going to kick you in the balls a third time just because twice wasn't enough.
And before you sign, we want you to ask us to do it again.
Yep. So that's where I know I brought up the Mike O'Shea thing on the expiring contract, but when you look at this coming weekend from the West, both head coaches in the West Final are first-time head coaches. Young offensive coordinator, young defensive coordinator. I know not young, but you know what I mean in the senses of young.
No, go ahead. Yeah,
they played the Canadian game. They've been seasoned. They've been around winning organizations. Obviously, Mace with a Grey Cup in Toronto, and then Pierce with, I believe, multiple Grey Cups with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and if not, multiple Grey Cup appearances with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, it's just this. I don't think we've had a shell shock announcement like this in the CFL in quite some time, because I feel like this doesn't happen as often. Like, how like with the NFL every year, there's always like one or like going into the NFL is quote unquote Black Monday. There's always a couple of names that like you expect to see coming, but then there's always one that comes up out of left field. Like this year, going into the season or going into the offseason, we knew pretty much 8 of the 9 head coaches were going to be safe. We all figured Bob Dice was on his way out. It just wasn't working in the nation's capital. But I don't know for Ottawa, though, does this really not heighten expectations, but does this I think it kind of can fast track a potential rebuild, but at the same time, too, for Toronto is where I'm worried if you don't get the hire right. And we talked about the ball kicking metaphor. It can really sink your season before it even begins. So I think Toronto really has to nail the hire and get someone who's willing to buy into being on the road. Get someone who, hey, we don't know where they're practicing next year. You could be at Guelph for 2 months instead of 3 weeks. There's so much to fall from this from the Argonauts perspective as compared to the Redblacks saying, hey, we're making a big baller move to insert, hey, where do you go from here? What is the next steps in plans A, B, and C for the Argonauts in 2026? Because the 2 teams playing Saturday, I'm going to reference these now for the East. You got a Montreal team that's not going anywhere. And you have a Hamilton team who may or may not lose their quarterback this offseason because of retirement, but at the same time, too, we'll be fine. So you do not want to become that 4th place team and also have a season where 2027, you're having a hard time drawing people back to BMO Field. You need to have a 2026 where you come out and you're winning games, to where then people next year can say, hey, we get our home games back, our season's back to a new CFL normal, but you need to just win this offseason to set up yourselves for the future. Because when I look at this, I look at a 3-year window, 5 years from now, because if you start falling down, there's going to be a lot of red empty seats at BMO Field over the next few seasons. It's just the nature of the beast.
I'll roll it back a little bit when we start talking about the reasons why Ryan Dinwiddie made it taking this opportunity in Ottawa. For me, it is simple as the new pecking order at MLSC changed. As you know, they've gotten rid of all the presidents, for example, of the TFC and the Argos, gone. Toronto Maple Leafs, gone.
Yep.
NBA Raptors, gone. So there's a position there that disappeared.
President.
Exactly. And a lot of people would have made this assumption here, if at all possible. There might have been room for pinball to move up and therefore create a bit of a vacuum. We know they have a general manager not in name of the team, right? And then Dinwiddie could have moved up to that level. The reason I'm saying that is because it was clear to me and clear to anybody who was listening and listening to Ryan Dinwiddie, he wanted to be a general manager. This is not, when I said this didn't surprise me, the reason it didn't surprise me is because of the position general manager that was thrown in there. And he wants to be a general manager. He likes the Canadian Football League, likes staying here. He's not a big NFL fan. He loves watching the game. He loves learning from the game, but he's not somebody that sees himself as an NFL, coach, general manager. But now he gets to go to a team that the bar is really low, right? Anything he can do better that they've done, that they can do in the future, will look good on him, will be a success. So he gets to go in there and maybe be a part of an eventuality that you and I and anybody else that's a football fan of the Canadian Football League has been waiting in anticipation for some sort of major improvement by the Ottawa Redblacks. And I think what made this desire of Ottawa is that they made the playoffs last year, did not have success against Dinwiddie's team. And I think they realize they've tried the coach, they've tried the GM, they've tried putting a new team in there, they tried sticking to the head coach they had. None of those things worked. What else is left? Well, new management structure. Who's around that maybe could help us get really good really fast? Boy, I mean, when you look under dictionary, football coach Ryan Dinwiddie, it says can get things going immediately. A big asset in immediate turnarounds and improvement by experience. And history is prologue.
Yes. Also, I just, while you were talking, I did happen to open my Outlook just because it said Outlook notification. And I got a media advisory from Chris. Basically, Pinball released a statement that basically thanks Ryan for his services. A capable, competent, and committed coach. He delivered more than we can ask. 2 Grey Cups, a Coach of the Year, a 16-2 regular season, the 4th most wins for a coach in Argonauts history. Ryan's impact on the organization will be forever appreciated. The Toronto Argonauts owe a debt of gratitude to Ryan and wish him the best going forward. The search is underway the search for a new head coach is underway. So I feel like they're not going to waste time doing this, but at the same time too, I feel like they gotta. I almost wonder if they'll have something. Do you think it would be before the Grey Cup, or do you think it would be after the Grey Cup they would make the hire?
Historically, they've waited a while to make moves that many of us would think they should make sooner rather than later. They have a history of taking their time making decisions like this. At least in my little memory log, I seem to recall they're a very patient organization to the point where sometimes people start panicking around them, right? So my first thing I'd say, using history as history as prologue, they're not going to be in any rush to find somebody. They're going to, I think Pinball's the kind of guy that would rather take longer to find the better and more right person.
Yeah.
To answer your question.
I feel like this could be like a end of, like, because if you think about it, this week's the East Final, next week's Grey Cup. I don't know how many staffs from other teams are in the Grey Cup. Like, how like with Super Bowl, usually you'll see representation from all 32 teams.
They're all around.
Yeah, I assume so in like a quiet capacity as someone who's only been to one Grey Cup in his life. But I feel like with them too, you're not going to hear many stories, I think, of names they're interviewing unless they're a serious contender. I don't think it's going to be like, like I've seen teams do this before. You're like, hey, we've completed an interview with this coach, and it's kind of thing. I think unless they get a development where someone's a serious candidate, Because like you said too, they eliminated the president position. I have to imagine Keith Pelly's going to have a bit of a say in this as well, apart from what Pinball says, what Murph says. They have to get it right, though, from a buy-in perspective, kind of like what Edmonton's done with Mark Killam, where you get the guys that want to play for him. You got it from Dinwiddie, Jason Moss. Every CFL team, you're seeing guys buy in for their head coach. Ottawa's got it now. Toronto, they need to make the right hire, because if you don't, that's where I kind of say you can quickly fall back into that where you were after 2017, where it just was 18, 19, and then COVID. You really had to wait until Ryan Dinwiddie put his footprint on the team to do anything of significance. So I feel like Toronto has the makings to turn this around. It's just you got to worry about, like I said, you're not going into a bright situation with the Argonauts. It's not like the Lions where they said, hey, we're playing Kelowna. It's going to be, hey, you're probably going to be in Regina for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You're going to be in Winnipeg for 2 weeks. You have to go play a home game in your rival's stadium, which makes me think, does the Argos just use the away locker room, or do they get to use the Ticats locker room? But I think it's the latter. There's so much from it. I feel like the Red Black perspective of this is simply a breath of fresh air for that organization. But from an Argonaut perspective, you got to be proactive, and not when you hire, but who you hire, because the longer you take, it's not the worst it can get, but it's just the lingering effects of it can really not be a beneficiary to you and your organization, and more importantly, the fan base.
Well, from the fan base perspective, they're looking at a team now that next year is going to have a lot of road games, more than they should have. Now they're looking at a team whose head coach, who had a really bad year, was part. Now he didn't have a really bad year. A guy who had a really bad situation. The team that he coached really dropped. I think he has the faith of many that he wasn't totally responsible for the collapse of the Toronto Argonauts. That a lot of that was inheriting problems that he didn't create, but kind of did. Sometimes success is your own worst enemy, and the success that Ryan Dinwiddie has had over the years has meant that a lot of players have had reputations elevated, and the interest in those players elevated by teams around him, and that includes looking for coaches, looking for players that are leaders. All that stuff worked against the Argos, and any team that has a bit of success in succession is going to have to deal with that. I think Winnipeg was the anomaly. How they held it together for me was that was admirable, to be able to keep that team together for as long as they have. For me, has been magic, really. The Bombers have stood alone in that regard. Montreal looks to be slipping into that shadow. To me, they look like a team that knows how to do it as well, because after winning the Grey Cup, there wasn't an exodus of players or coaches out of Montreal. If they happen to win it again this year, of course, they'll have to beat Hamilton to do that. But if they did that this year, that'll be a good test. So there's no guarantee, because you have a powerful team, that you're going to continue to have a powerful team, is what that means. And what that leads to is my comment about the Argonauts and the Canadian Football League in general. I think the Argos have a chance to improve, because there's only two things in my mind that ruin a team for an opportunity to be successful. That's bad luck and bad management. So those two things can hold a team back. But if you have neither of those, if you don't have bad luck and if you don't have bad management, the opportunity is never a problem to get great players. There are just too many, as a football fan, there are just too many great football players. Some of them selling sports equipment before they become big stars in Canada. Some of them retire, and then somebody says, why don't you come back? And they're big stars. Look at Lee in BC. He was on his way to retiring. He comes back to BC, and he's the center of a defensive improvement that now puts them on the precipice of making it to the Grey Cup. So there's always hope in the Canadian Football League, and that's why you hire Ryan Dinwiddie, because he can get you a winner. And that's the part that's important, that's positive for the Red Blacks. whom are sick and tired of waiting for some sort of success. This is an organization, and I'm finished my rant here because I'm rambling now. I'm sorry. But this is an organization, day one, Grey Cup they're in the shadows of the Grey Cup. So, and since they won their Grey Cup, they have been horrible. And they've been horrible for a long time. And it's hard to sell tickets to a horrible team. And worse than that, one thing that one can say about the Canadian Football League, there is not a league with each its franchises that take root in a community and are a big part of the community. When you consider how short the schedule is, how impactful they are in every community that the Canadian Football League finds itself in, puts additional pressure to be better.
Yeah, because now you just have this, like, not revolving door, but you just have this, like, window of, hey, like, the whole thing about getting better. It's the whole thing of just, like, how can I be better than yesterday? How can I improve my game as a whole? Every team's looking to do it. Some teams have got it down to a pattern. Like you said, Winnipeg was able to hold it together for 5+ years, which is remarkable considering there wasn't a 2020 season. Obviously, this year's going to be a new representative from the West, new representative from the East. We're going to get a first-time Grey Cup since 2018, which is remarkable. Although, unless Hamilton gets there, but that's a different story. But this is a league where parity exists, but this is a league too where, for as much as we love to say the season begins on Labor Day, what you do before Labor Day, which is really going to be the Achilles heel for the Argonauts in 2026, can really derail and kill your season. Like, there's a couple games pre-Labor Day that if the Argonauts had won, maybe their season's not done by the end of September. They got to. Because here's the thing, same thing with Edmonton too. But with Toronto, though, you're going into 2026 and here's where things can really get ugly. You have a quarterback who's not played that many games over the last 2 years, who's going into the final year of a contract. You have a quarter, which also makes me, I'll have to get to it in a second. You have other older players. You had a bad job of roster management in 2025 where you let people go and think, hey, you know what? The right guys are going to step up, which some of them did in key moments, but there's other moments where guys just did not look the same. And then your one shining bright light is offensively, you've had some pieces develop, but at the same time, for some key receivers emerged, the run game was flat. The offensive line was just terrible. And quarterback, once Nick Arbuckle went down, pretty much it was, waving the white flag on this season as a whole. So that's where I feel like it's so it's so productive to get the hire right, because if you don't get the hire right, that's where you just spiral and where you're doing the same song and dance in 2 to 3 years from now. And that's why I said for them, for 2027, for 2028, because you want to have a good 2026, because you need to get people excited for 27, 28 when you're back to a normal thing. I feel like if the Argonauts didn't have the 12 road games, as opposed to, I know we say road games, if they had a normal 9-9, no World Cup, I don't think this is a problem. Not knocking the World Cup, because obviously that's the World Cup. We also have a special guest joining us, because it's the same thing as always, from his car in a very nice suit, Mr. Morris Sudi. We've been just going on for the last 25 minutes about the breaking news of the Argonauts needing a new head coach and also offensive coordinator too. So I'm going to chime into you. What are your thoughts and feelings on this whole events that have transpired over the last, I would say, hour and a half?
Yeah, absolute just panic in terms of a lot of people message me, ask me exactly what you're asking. Like, Argos are now without a big nucleus of what's made them so successful the last 4 years, since, Ryan Dinwiddie took over during the pandemic. That's why I say 5 years. A lot of the planning he did was during the pandemic. The main question for me isn't just how do you replace Ryan Dinwiddie, who's following him to Ottawa, right? There are some, I always ask how many people are loyal to the organization versus people who are in the organization. We just saw when they lose a defensive line coach, the entire defensive line goes and follows him to another team, right? And so who's following him, right? When you talk about the offensive coordinator role now, obviously a lot of this has to deal with who becomes the next head coach, right? I look at a guy like Pete Costanza, who, in a way, was like the offensive coordinator because he did plan for a lot of how the offense is run in that team. But obviously, he didn't have. It's still Ryan Dinwiddie who calls the shots and all that stuff. So I think that for me is the big one. Who's leaving? Who's staying? Who's going? And that puts into kind of the large picture of what is going to come next.
David, while you were joining us, I made a point with Griff about the Argos don't move quickly on situations like this. They take their time. That's
They
what
do.
they've done. And the time that they need now, as you said, is not just to fill the head coach position, and then that guy's got to fill who the rest of the coaches are. And who are the coaches that the organization is going to say, no, we want you to keep this guy, and they've been known to do that as well. They've been known to pick, coordinators and coaches for the head coach. So it's going to be an interesting mix mash of whatever is finally decided.
Well, that's it, right? There are just so many different things that are talked about with this whole situation where that becomes the bigger part of the puzzle, right? The Argos have never really moved quick. Now they kind of moved quick when they got Dinwiddie, right? They did it before the literally end of the season, right? But with this whole decision, I'm just wondering, do they have they how much of a heads up did they get on this? How much of a jump did they have? Did they have to start looking for coaching? Obviously this didn't happen today. This has been in the works for a bit, right? And so I think that's the big part of what the Argos need to figure out is
No,
go,
I
Griff.
just saw a Naylor tweet about from an Ottawa side that they had asked late last week permission. They got the approval Monday, so they moved very, very quick to get it done. Just from an Ottawa perspective, I just saw
Something well, I mean, look, you and I, everyone knows there's always a little bit of tampering, a little bit of whispers, and I think that plays a part in this whole thing too, right?
exactly.
So, I gotta jump. I'll let you guys continue, but I just wanted to give those kind of quick thoughts, and I'll listen to what you guys have had to say on this. And well, Frank, I think our show got a little more interesting with all this, huh?
A little bit, and I didn't mention. I think did I mention that we were in the middle of getting Ryan Dinwiddie on the show for tomorrow?
We were planning on having him on. Yeah, that was in the works. He might be a little busy now.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier, but it wasn't anything about would he be on. It was more or less I was congratulating him on
Boise State. Big week for Ryan the Dinwiddie household. I'll tell you that. So
a lot of emotions.
I wonder if Toronto knew because they didn't really mention or there was nothing big about that. They just pretty much shared the Instagram from Boise State and everything like that. There wasn't a really keen thing. So now it's kind of reading between the lines of, hey, because otherwise you would have expected them to have a little bit more of a congratulatory statement or release or even something from just Chris in general. But we saw. I know you tweeted the statement. I read the statement on air from Pinball.
Mm-hmm.
The only point I will say to you, David, before you go, that I made was that they need to be proactive because you need to do well in 2026 to gain the interest back in 2027 when you're back to a normal home slate.
I agree.
That's where this is huge. But before you go, just one more quick question: Do you go with a man in Winnipeg who's an Argonaut legend on an expiring contract, or do you go for the young fresh mind like a Mark Mueller or a Tommy Condell?
I probably wouldn't do Condell. I don't know how he would be as a head coach.
He's been hit and miss.
They went with the unproven route before, and it worked for them. If Pinball's not afraid to do that, it all depends on who's available. If Mike O'Shea, the guy you're mentioning, is available, he may want a new challenge. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, he'd be moving sideways, right? And probably a little further away from being successful than he will be being in Winnipeg. So Winnipeg, I don't think Winnipeg's going to be a big rebuild, even though they didn't make the Grey Cup this year. So, the bar's kind of high for them. So, but the question is this something is this a premonition as to what their future is, that they're a team that are going to start to, to drop a little bit, or are they just a team that hit a little bump and they're still going to be competitive, because they are competitive. There's that, where the Argos were not.
Yeah, because at the time when I don't really remember too much of when Winnipeg hired O'Shea, but I know when the Argonauts hired Dinwiddie, they wanted something, like we said, it was the new challenge. It was Dinwiddie coming from a Dave Dickinson system. But for O'Shea, though, I feel like it's a very good lateral move because, like we said, he's played here before and he brings that winning pedigree because, like we say, for Toronto as well, you hit for him. Come home, because I'm pretty sure he still lives here in the off season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he still has residence in the province.
Yes, he does.
So, and also too, I'm pretty sure he either played with Pinball or was on this team when Pinball was coaching.
No, I'm not. You know what? I'm not sure about that. I don't think so, because he was out west playing. You can check anyway.
I'm going to check right now with that. Where Mike O'Shea he's also too. He's only
Mike O'Shea. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry. I was on the Dinwiddie train. Absolutely. O'Shea won a Grey Cup in Toronto. He was on the team in 2012 as a coach. He was a linebackers coach, I believe, something like that. He wasn't a defensive coach.
He was so he had
special teams coach. That's what it was.
He was a special teams coach for 2012, but he was a player for 96, 97, and 2004. Yes. 2004, because that's his first CFL game I ever remember watching, and that Pinball speech always lives with me. It's something I watch whenever I need a little motivation. Him in the locker room talking to the guys before. It's just one of my favorite coach speeches, pregame speeches of all time. And then 96, 97, I know that was the Doug Flutie one. So let's see, Michael Clemens, I'm going to put the pieces together, was an Argonaut from 98 to 2000. So they were teammates for the first two. 96 and 97, they were teammates. And then Pinball was O'Shea's head coach for 2004.
Right.
Yes. But we've spent half an hour on Ryan Dinwiddie because I was expected to come in here, recap the semifinals from last week, but we all know what happened. Calgary made it exciting. Winnipeg didn't really have the Jets. No pun intended. But we move on to this week's games as we have the East Final. As always, guys, CFL 2025, Gents Boutiques, East and West Final picks, where we have the Hamilton Tiger Cats as a +2.5 home underdog. Frank is going to be at this game doing his thing from the press box. I myself will be at the Yates Cup watching Laurier and Queens play. For a game like this, I really want to go Montreal because, Davis Alexander's undefeated. Davis Alexander's never lost in the CFL. But there's just something there's something to the Hamilton Tiger Cats this year. And there's a beautiful story to be told about not only them winning and breaking the drought, but them winning amidst the tragedies that they've had to face over the last couple months with Ted Kavaya's passing. So I got to go with the Cats. It's just something, so there's that gut feeling.
They have a demon to slay, and the biggest demon that they have to slay is bad luck at home. Not in playoffs. The playoffs have not been a successful thing for Hamilton. So the question is, can they overcome that? And the answer, it will come from Montreal. If Montreal plays as devastatingly as well as they played, and Davis Alexander, he's got to lose a game eventually. And Montreal's hoping that he doesn't lose one till next year because the next two games are so important. I'm with you. I guess the reason the only reason I would pick Hamilton is because they're the last team to win a Grey Cup in this century. I'd like to see that for their fans. Not that I'm a big fan of their fans, but in being in a neutral position, saying, if I didn't care, they would be the team that I would hope would win. But and the problem for me is that will Davis Alexander be the quarterback, and will that defense be as tough as they can be? Hamilton has a pretty good offense. I think their offense was a little bit better than the one in Winnipeg, and part of the reason is they have a pretty good receiver from Winnipeg from last year.
I love the over of 53.5 in this game. I just think it's going to be this game honestly can come down to what Labor Day was. Whoever has the ball last, whoever makes that simplest of simple mistakes is truly, truly what can be the difference between going to Winnipeg and, for lack of a better word, going to Cancun.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what. I got somebody on the phone here. It wasn't planned. He happened to call because he's a friend of mine, and he's somebody that has been an Argo supporter for decades. So much so that he didn't just buy a ticket for him or a ticket for him and his wife. He bought multiple tickets to invite people to come to the game. I was one of the people that got invited. John, I'm going to ask him if you can talk. He is a big Argo fan. You want to hear what an Argo fan has to say?
Sure.
Okay, John, you got about 30 seconds because he's got a big schedule. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I'm in shock, first of all, and it just feels like a destruction of the franchise right now, the Argos. I'm perplexed. I mean, I don't have the full story. That's the reason why I called you, Frank, to see if you know the details on this. But I mean, unless they get out there and start telling us what's going on, I'm upset. Naturally, this is crazy. I can see this now with Dinwiddie going there because he got a better offer, but. I mean, I guess he wants to be a GM. That's the only explanation I can think about.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Better title, more money.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, to me, he was like that he solidified the team. Every year, we knew that we had a head. That somebody who knows the game, knows the players, who knows the chemistry, who knows this organization. And he just had everything. I guess that's why he's attractive to Ottawa. But guys, I'm in shock. Okay?
I think that answers the question, John. Thanks for that. You can have your show back now.
It's all good. Hey, first time ever, 2 callers in. I don't mind it. You gotta love it. But I love it when people ask me. I sent it to people, and everyone's like, "Did you know this was coming?" I'm like, "No, I don't have sources. I know people. I know people who have.
People who know people. Yeah,
I know people who know people. I don't know shit. That's the thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, do you know what's happening?" This. I'm like, I don't know. The only time I have ever been word to the wise of something was when Chad went on the 6th game. I had found out during the game that was going on, and then it broke and then basically what happened was during the game, it kind of post game, it kind of came out. So instead of me being like, "Hey, so is this true?" It was more or less, "Hey, what happened with this?" So that's the only time I've ever been in the know of something was back in July when I found out early Chad was going on the 6th game.
Well, I have a question for you. I hope you're in the know.
Mm-hmm.
Chad, you mentioned Chad Kelly. I mean, the guy they hire is going to have an opinion on that. I can't believe that nobody would have an opinion. No new guy who's coming in. Remember, the new guy's not going to be invested in Kelly at all. Kelly's just here, and if he feels uncomfortable with Kelly for any reason, and we've seen a couple of reasons that should be off-putting to anybody who joins the team. First of all, a little bit of history. We're all hoping
on field and off field.
Exactly, and injury time. So that to me is something that a guy who's coming in fresh, or a woman, whoever they decide to have in charge, may ask themselves, do I want to add that to my challenges?
That's because here's the other thing too, though. We all know Nick Arbuckle had a really rough history in Ottawa. Does Ryan Dinwiddie try to poach him? Do the Argonauts look and say, "Hey, we don't want to have this whole we want to have Kelly or we have Arbuckle. So if we deal one, we get some players in return that might help us on the defensive side of the ball. Do we do it?" There's also a morale thing too, because I know there's some Redblacks. There's fans of basically everywhere, not with the Argos, who just can stand Chad Kelly. So I think if he says "Hey, I want to go somewhere where I can be the guy," he can be the guy in Ottawa. Ottawa too does have some nice pieces to go along. They have Geno Lewis. They have Justin Hardy. They have a great running game with, I think, a guy who I don't know how he's going to play because he never really fit well in a Dinwiddie system, but in Dan Adeboboye. Also, too, you have Khalil Pimpleton. So you have an Ottawa team that's ready to go that just needs quarterback. What's stopping Dinwiddie from calling up Pinball and saying, "Hey, Chad's on the last year of his contract, and I don't know if he's going to extend. One point I brought up last time was, or does Chad Kelly quietly retire, kind of like what Enoch Mwamba did after the 2023 season? So
Can I add a little bit to what you just said?
yeah,
If you're a receiver, a lot of the decisions they make is not just money, not the team, but the quarterback on the team. That can
who's
have
throwing me the
impact.
ball? Who's throwing me the ball? That's why probably Kenny Lawler, besides obviously Ted Gavaya, Kenny Lawler and Drew Wolodarski probably went to Hamilton because they probably saw, hey, where can I go that gives me the best chance to win with a great gunslinger at quarterback? And we see what Bo Levi Mitchell's doing. We've seen what Nathan Rourke has done with the cast of guys he's got, probably going to win MOP next week.
We've seen what Fajardo has done.
We've seen what Cody's done in Edmonton, Davis in Montreal.
Harrison, Saskatchewan.
And with Trevor Harrison, Saskatchewan, VA there. We've seen it all around the league, even Zach to an extent still with Winnipeg, although I can make the argument with Winnipeg, take out Trey Vavel. I don't know if they make the playoffs. But with Toronto, though, they just need to, hey, does Kelly go? It's very interesting of what guys are going to want to go with Dinwiddie. Because we all thought Winton, it was either Toronto or Hamilton, just because, he lives here. He still works out with the team facility. There's a lot that Winton still does. But now is it, hey, do I pick up and move? We all know Dinwiddie wanted to be in Ottawa long term, but at the end of the day with him, and I know it's cycling back, it's just, I don't think there's been a CFL bombshell news like this in a very, very long time, or not one that I can recall that's as crazy as this. So
one that's as shifting as this, because now you have a shifting of power from Toronto, to Ottawa, and have that shift happen within the same division as well.
Yes.
There's that as well, right?
That's exactly it. So, and also too, just going through Twitter right here, David pointed it out. Pete Costanza is the best kept secret in the CFL. Also, too, Chris Sweet is another person, but he's more of an offensive line coach. So we'd see what happened there. But now for Toronto, what are you going to do with D coordinator? Because Ryan, I would imagine, keeps, I believe it's Fields in, who's the DC in Ottawa? Who was the DC that went to Ottawa this past year?
I don't remember.
I don't remember, but one of the ones from 2024 went to Ottawa. Yeah.
One of the half.
One of the halves is the full. So I imagine he's there. I imagine he may try to. We'll see what happens, but there's just so many layers to this. I feel like we're going to have to peel back the onion one layer at a time, even though I am calling this podcast In the Hunt. But we also have a West final to talk about. I love Nathan Rourke. I love the season he's had. I've always said there's something about Saskatchewan this entire year. Because for them to, here's the other caveat with why I think Sask is going to win this game. Do you want to know how much they probably want to go into their rival's stadium, in their rival's locker room, and win a Grey Cup 3 years after Winnipeg almost tried to do the exact same thing in their stadium? It's a story that's not getting talked about a lot, but you can definitely imagine there are Rider fans and Rider players who want to go hoist that trophy for the first time in 12 years in their rival stadium. You know how poetic that would be?
Rivals stadium and locker room.
Party in there. They want to party in that Blue Bomber locker room.
Yeah, it's a marvelous thing. I'm hedging my bet towards Saskatchewan as well. I give the Riders the edge for two reasons that are really one reason: the weather, the running game on Saskatchewan's part, and the difficulty it is when cold weather, depending on the weather, it gets harder on the quarterback and the receivers than it does on the running game.
This game's also going to come down to just, we've seen it earlier this year, even though it was Jeremiah Masoli at quarterback, Saskatchewan torched that team. If this game is going to come down to who has better ball security and which quarterback can win the turnover battle. Nathan Rourke has a bad day at the office. It's going to be a very long day for the Lions. If the BC secondary cannot keep up with Saskatchewan's offense, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Matthew Betts has looked really good in the last couple months of the season. But that Rough Rider offensive line was one going into the year that had a lot of question marks, but all those boys said, no, we're good. And they just keep powering, they keep moving forward. And they're that kind of team that they're going to punch you in the face, and they're going to do it with a smile on their face. They're going to look at you and just beat you down, but they're going to be smiling from cheek to cheek because that's what they are. They'll maul you, they'll break you. And like we said too, I'm going to look up quickly. I'm going to Google the weather situation because obviously with Regina, that's something you got to always take into account. Regina weather. So right now it's 5 degrees and cloudy. Saturday at kick. So 6 p.m. our time. It is going to be -8.
Well, that works against a really good quarterback.
It absolutely does. And that's where if Nathan Rourke's going to have to win this game either on his feet or the feet of James Butler or Horvath.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
It's going to be a running game battle. The battle's going to be the battle's going to be in the trenches.
Also, too, if you have to pick me between James Butler and AJ Ouellette is built for games like this. He's built to ground and pound when it's freezing cold out. He's probably not going to have sleeves on. The hair's going to be flowing, and he's going to be looking to leave his mark on this game.
And his mark on a few people.
Exactly. He's going to be the Dan Campbell, bite the kneecaps, just take a chunk out of you and just keep moving. Like you said, we're going to knock you down. We're going to smile. We're going to get back up with a smile. We're going to bite a kneecap on the way up. Like, that's the kind of football I think the Riders are going to play.
We're saying this is going to be a real Rider home game.
I think
it's you've got that compared to what happens in BC Place.
Mm-hmm. Because here's the other thing too, though. We know the Lions in the dome, they can light it up and look great.
Absolutely. Agreed.
You're going into the cold. They did it I'm pretty sure this was a playoff matchup last year in the cold, and the Lions fell short. I will also say this for this game too. I think
they're a better team this year, though. I think we have to give them a nod for being better than they were last year. Yep. But unfortunately, I think Saskatchewan's also better. So really, the question is, how much better are both teams? Will that determine who wins?
I have a crazy prediction for this one. Give me Sask to win the game. Give me the Lions to cover the 3.5. Give me Sask to win 23-20. A real slugfest. That's also, too, kicking is going to be a huge question in this game. Brett Lowther and Sean White, you have one of the best CFL kickers in recent memory versus a guy who's really struggled this year. This game could easily come down to the foot of a kicker in that freezing cold weather.
That's again, points are at a premium in this kind of weather. Yards are, success by a quarterback. And the other thing is, in this kind of weather, players have a hard time squeezing the ball. I know they have all the technology, the gloves and stuff like that, but there's chances for more interceptions in this case, just because if it's that cold and if the footing has any kind of deviation from being normal, that'll add to the fact that the ball could change hands a few times just because of the weather and the cold.
1,000%. It's going to be a great weekend of CFL football. It's been a bit of it's been a chaotic 2 hours of CFL football. Also, for the timing of the announcement, too, it's like, hey, middle of the week news drop, something I feel like we don't really see that often in the CFL until the off season. It's going to be interesting to see where the Argonauts go from here. It's going to be interesting to see who's going to be in the Grey Cup. We had 4 guests on today, the most we've had in a while. We had David Morisuti drop by, Frank's friend John dropped by. But Frank and I held the fort down for the most part. As always, I love being on his show. I hope he loves being on here. But we got a great weekend of CFL football ahead of us, and episode number 404 in the bag. We'll be back for episode number 405, where we get you ready for week 10 of the NFL season later on tonight. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you very much for listening.